I paid $150,000 for my grandson's dream wedding, and then he sent me a text telling me I wasn't welcome. No phone call, no conversation, just a message that flashed across my screen at 11:47 p.m., while the rest of the neighborhood slept under the quiet glow of porch lights. "Grandma, please don't come. You'll create drama and ruin our day." I read it once, twice, a third time, letting each word cut deeper than the last. It felt as if my heart had slipped straight through my ribcage and dropped onto the cold tile floor of my kitchen. My money was invited. My presence wasn't. I sat at that kitchen table with nothing but the soft hum of the refrigerator and the golden halo of my pendant lamp overhead. Spread around me were the final invoices for the Greenridge Estate ceremony, a venue so expensive I had hesitated before writing the check, but Evan had wanted it so much that my hesitation lasted barely a breath. I had spent weeks reviewing catering options, running my fingers across linen samples, inspecting floral mock-ups, listening to music samples for the string ensemble. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. And yet the people I did all of this for had decided the one thing they didn't want was me. That night, as the clock passed midnight and my coffee turned cold, I kept seeing Evan as a little boy, his skinny legs swinging from my bar stool, his hands sticky with melted popsicle, his eyes bright as he told me he wanted to be someone important someday. I raised him from the time he was 6, after my daughter, his mother, passed unexpectedly. I stepped in without hesitation, because love doesn't ask for applause or announcements. It simply shows up. I took him to doctor's appointments, school plays, summer camps. I taught him how to tie a tie. I helped him apply for internships. I gave him everything I had because he was all I had left. And for many years, that was enough. But everything shifted 2 years ago when he met Lena Hartman. She was a sweet girl at first, nervous, artistic, uncertain but polite. And then Derek Malone walked into the picture. Lena's self-proclaimed branding consultant, an influencer type with perfect hair and no real job. Derek seemed to ooze into every corner of their lives, always carrying a camera, always talking about aesthetic, always giving unsolicited advice on how to curate their image. At first, I thought he was just harmlessly obnoxious. Later, I realized he was something much darker. He criticized everything that didn't fit his vision for their brand, including me. Slowly, Evan stopped coming for Sunday dinners. He joked that my house looked too old-fashioned for his social media presence. He began using phrases that didn't sound like him, phrases Derek used. If I asked how school or work was going, he would tell me I worried too much, or that he didn't need traditional family pressure. He started telling small lies about where money was going, about events he forgot to attend, about why Lena never called me back. But still, I brushed it off. Young people change. Relationships shift priorities. I told myself it was normal, until the night that text message arrived. I held my phone like it was a ticking device. The more I read the message, the more I felt both numb and strangely awake. Something was wrong far beyond wedding stress. The tone didn't sound like Evan. It sounded scripted, coached. And the phrase, "create drama," that was pure Derek. I knew his cadence, the little digs delivered behind a smile. He'd made comments before about how older relatives ruin the vibe of modern events. He never said it directly to me, of course. He said it in general, loudly enough for me to hear. I began to wonder, was this really Evan speaking? Or had someone else's hand been guiding the message? My eyes drifted back to the stack of contracts spread across my table. Greenridge Estate, $45,000. Artisan floral arrangement package, $19,200. Platinum tier catering, $30,500. Photography, videography, decor, lighting, transportation, and dozens of small details that added up to a number I had never imagined spending on a single day. Every document had one thing in common, one detail so obvious I felt foolish for never noticing it before. At the top of every page, in bold, centered font, were the words, "Billing Party, Margaret Rowley, 8. It hit me slowly, then all at once. They wanted my money, not my presence. They wanted the luxury I could give them, but not the woman who earned it. Something inside me, something quiet, something old, something that had been sleeping for far too long stirred awake. A sense of dignity I had ignored for the sake of family harmony began rising like a tide I could no longer push back. I whispered to myself, "If I'm such a problem, then my money is a problem too." And when I said those words out loud, something clicked into place. I pushed my chair back and walked to my living room window, staring out into the silent street. I had spent years believing love meant giving without limits, but suddenly I wondered, had I created this dynamic by solving every problem, by paying every bill, by smoothing every rough edge? Had I unintentionally taught Evan that my support was unconditional, even in the absence of respect? No, I thought, not anymore. I returned to the table, opened my laptop, and pulled up the digital copies of every contract. The cancellation clauses were neatly outlined. Some required 7 days' notice, others 72 hours, but all of them were still fully refundable. I had time. Legally, financially, emotionally, and I was suddenly certain of one thing. If Evan didn't want me at the wedding, I would respect that fully and completely. But there was something I didn't yet know, something that would change the course of the next month of my life. A truth no wedding planner, no influencer, no photographer could have prepared me for. A truth that would make the wedding drama feel small compared to the storm waiting just beyond it. And as I closed my laptop that night, unaware of what was coming, a simple thought crossed my mind. Some lessons are worth every dollar it takes to teach them. Too wise? When morning finally came, I hadn't slept a minute. I sat on my couch holding my phone, staring at that message from Evan over and over, trying to convince myself that somehow I had misunderstood, that maybe there was a missing piece that would make everything make sense. But no matter how I flipped it around, the meaning stayed the same. They didn't want me there. And the longer I held the phone, the more I felt that the words weren't just dismissive, they were rehearsed, shaped by someone else's voice. Evan had never spoken to me like that in his entire life. Not when he was frustrated. Not when he was a teenager trying to push boundaries. Not ever. I typed a reply, carefully choosing each word. "Evan, sweetheart, can we please talk about this? I don't understand what I've done to cause drama." I waited 5 minutes, then 10, then 15. No answer. Just the little delivered mark beneath my message, cold and unmoved. I tried calling him next. Straight to voicemail. The kind of voicemail you get when someone sees your call and chooses not to take it. My heart tightened, and for a moment, I wondered if I should just show up at his apartment, knock on the door, confront this head on. But then I remembered the last time I visited, and how differently things had felt even then. It had been 3 weeks earlier. I'd shown up with a container of his favorite soup, the one I used to make when he was sick as a kid. He answered the door only halfway, barely letting me step inside. Lena was at the kitchen counter while Derek filmed something on his phone, some staged laughter, some artificial slice of life content. When I walked in, the energy shifted. Derek lowered his camera and gave me this tight smile, the kind people give when they're not happy to see you but want to pretend they are. "Oh," he had said, "this really isn't on brand." And Evan had laughed, even though the joke wasn't funny. I stood there holding the soup container like an outsider in a place that used to feel like home. Maybe the text wasn't the beginning of the betrayal. Maybe it was just the first time I let myself see it. By noon, my mind was racing with every memory of Derek's influence. The little comments about aesthetics, the subtle digs at older people, the forced branding sessions. He wanted Evan and Lena polished, perfect, controlled. I had assumed he saw me as a harmless inconvenience. Now I understood. He saw me as a threat to the narrative he was shaping around them. The self-made couple, the young power duo, the modern love story, free from traditional family interference. In that fantasy, there was no room for a grandmother who had actually paid for everything. I could feel my pulse building in my ears as the realization settled. They weren't just uninviting me, they were erasing me. I needed answers, so I sent one more message. This time, I didn't sugarcoat anything. "Evan, I need you to tell me exactly what I did to deserve being excluded from your wedding. Try." The reply came back in less than 30 seconds. "Grandma, you know how controlling you can be. Lena and I think it's best if this day is focused on us. We don't want drama. Please respect our boundaries." I have a loudest, controlling. The word hit me harder than anything else. I had spent 20 years supporting him emotionally, financially, and physically. I had never once raised my voice at him in anger. I had never once asked him to repay me for anything. And suddenly I was controlling? I put my hand over my mouth as something inside me cracked. It wasn't the insult itself, it was how confidently he said it. How certain he seemed that I would accept the label, that I would shrink under the accusation, that I would quietly step aside and keep paying for the wedding while they posed for photos without me. I needed the truth. I needed to hear it from his own lips. So I drove to his apartment. When I arrived, I saw Derek's car parked outside, sleek, black, shiny, the kind of car someone drives when they care more about appearances than substance. I knocked on the door, and when it opened, Lena stood there with an apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. Evan was behind her, arms crossed, posture defensive. Derek hovered in the back like a shadow, watching everything. "I just want to understand," I said. "When have I ever created drama in your life? When have I ever tried to make anything about me?" "I did." Evan shifted his weight. "Grandma, you always ask too many questions. About our plans, our finances, our choices. It feels like you don't trust us." I blinked, stunned. Asking questions is not controlling. It's what family does when they care. "And one. That's your definition," Derek cut in, as if he had been waiting for his moment. "For young adults, boundaries matter. Independence matters. No offense, Margaret, but your involvement comes across as intrusive." "Yes." Lena gave a small nod, as if agreeing made her part of something important. My heartbeat slowed. I inhaled deeply. Intrusive. I was intrusive because I wanted them to be safe, because I cared, because I paid for things they couldn't afford. "So," I said quietly, "your solution is to delete me from the wedding I'm paying for?" "And court." Evan's jaw tightened. "We thought you'd understand." "SS. I do," I whispered, "just not in the way you think." "I am so." A wave of cold clarity washed over me, and in that moment, something shifted inside, subtle, steady, irreversible. I realized the person standing in front of me wasn't the boy I raised. He was someone shaped by people who needed me gone, someone who had forgotten history, loyalty, and gratitude because someone else told him those things were inconvenient. I nodded slowly, forcing a small smile. "Thank you for explaining." And before they could say another word, I turned and walked away. As the door shut behind me, I heard Derek mutter, "See? Crisis avoided." I know. They had no idea what crisis had just begun. For the first time since receiving that cruel text, I felt something stronger than hurt. I felt purpose, determination. A fire I thought had gone out years ago, reigniting. And as I reached my car, one thought echoed louder than the rest. If my presence wasn't welcome, then neither was my money. When I drove home that afternoon, the sky was turning a heavy gray, the type that makes everything look sharper than it should. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, my breath shallow, my thoughts running in circles. I didn't know how to escape. I kept hearing Evan's voice in my head, accusing me of being controlling, intrusive, dramatic. Words that had never belonged to him until very recently. Words that carried Derek's fingerprints all over them. And no matter how many times I replayed the conversation, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that something far below the surface was steering all of this. I sat in my driveway longer than necessary, letting the car idle, listening to the soft hum of the engine. My home, once a sanctuary, suddenly felt foreign, like I was returning to a place that no longer recognized me. I stepped into my living room and looked around at the framed photos on the wall. Evan in his graduation gown, Evan blowing out candles at age 12, Evan hugging me at his college acceptance celebration. Photos of a boy who used to trust me, who used to love me, who used to run into my arms instead of hiding behind someone else's opinions. The boy in those photos would never have uninvited me from anything. He would never have parroted another person's criticisms. That boy was gone. I sat down on my sofa, closed my eyes, and allowed myself 1 minute, just one, to grieve. Not the wedding, not the $150,000, but the loss of the relationship I thought we had. Because in that moment, I realized the betrayal didn't start with a text message. It started long before, in small, almost invisible moments. Moments I had dismissed as growing pains. I-5 to plays. Second, I remembered the first time I noticed a change. It was after Evan began attending Derek's so-called content workshops. Derek called them brand intensives, but they were really just opportunities for him to mold young couples into online versions of themselves, more polished, more marketable, more curated. They were always about angles, lighting, aesthetics, storytelling for the camera, never about truth. After a few sessions, Evan started speaking differently, like he was reading from a script someone else wrote. He became obsessed with opportunities, visibility, engagement metrics. I brushed it off, because he was young, eager, and excited about success. But then came the day he told me my holiday decorations were too cluttered for the kind of photos he and Lena wanted to take. I had spent hours hanging garlands and setting the table, waiting for them to arrive. Instead of appreciating it, he walked through my house with Derek's voice in his ear, pointing out inconsistencies in the theme. That was the first time I felt dismissed. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but dismissed nonetheless. The next shift came 6 months later. I'd bought Evan a new laptop, a surprise gift to help him with his job applications. He thanked me, but the gratitude was quick and distracted. Derek arrived minutes later to film them, unboxing a gift from a supporter. He made Evan redo the reaction 3 times bigger smile, more excitement, more gratitude, all for the camera. The genuine moment between grandmother and grandson vanished, behind manufactured content. I stood there feeling like an unpaid extra in a show I didn't audition for. And yet I said nothing, because that's what grandmothers do. We forgive quietly, hoping the phase will pass. But somewhere along the way, the phase didn't pass. It grew. It solidified. It became the backbone of Evan's new life, a life where family mattered only if it made good footage. I noticed the financial shifts next. He began requesting small amounts of money, always for something urgent. A bill he forgot, an unexpected expense, a last-minute shoot he needed to attend. They weren't big numbers at first, so I didn't think much of it. But the requests grew more frequent. Then they grew larger. Eventually, he stopped asking with explanations and started asking with expectations. I tried to talk to him about budgeting once gently, careful not to sound judgmental, but he brushed me off instantly, repeating one of Derek's lines. "Grandma, money is a flow. You either operate with abundance or you don't." That was the moment I should have recognized the manipulation. But love makes you blind, especially when it's love layered with guilt and memory and the fear of losing the last piece of your child's legacy. So when Evan and Lena came to me with their dream wedding, I said yes without thinking twice. They showed me photo boards, venue inspiration, color palettes, menus. Their excitement felt real enough to eclipse everything else. I didn't see the cracks then. I didn't see the calculation. I didn't see how quickly my generosity had shifted from appreciated to expected. But the betrayal wasn't just in being uninvited. It was in the ease with which they removed me, the confidence with which they believed I would accept it, the audacity of assuming I would keep paying for a day I wasn't allowed to attend. I felt anger rise in me, not the volcanic kind, but the cold, measured kind that comes from understanding the full scope of a wound. I wasn't angry at Evan for growing up. I wasn't angry at Lena for being swept along by Derek's ego. I was angry that they had rewritten our history in their minds to justify treating me like an inconvenience. That realization stung. And yet, it clarified everything. I walked back to my kitchen table, opened my planner, and looked at the wedding timeline I had carefully built over months. It was color-coded, neatly organized, beautifully structured. I had poured love into every part of it. Now it felt like a blueprint of my own humiliation. I closed the book. Then I opened my laptop. Then I pulled out every contract and placed them in one stack. Because betrayal doesn't just hurt, it awakens something. And in my case, it awakened the part of me that remembered I wasn't powerless. I wasn't voiceless. I wasn't optional. And I was about to remind all of them, of something they had forgotten. Something I had forgotten too. Everything they were building stood on money that didn't belong to them. And all of it could disappear with a single decision. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Not anger, not sadness, just certainty, quiet and heavy, like a stone resting in the center of my chest. I brewed coffee, sat down at my dining table, and opened every single wedding contract. I had skimmed them before, trusting the vendors, trusting Evan, trusting the process. But this time, I didn't skim. I read every line, every clause, every billing detail. And as I read, the truth revealed itself piece by piece. My name, my address, my signature. On every document, every invoice had been emailed to me. Every deposit had come from my bank account. Every vendor contact number was tied to my phone. Evan and Lena had planned the wedding, but I had built it, legally, financially, structurally, and suddenly, I understood the full power of that fact. I picked up the first contract, Greenridge Estate, the venue they obsessed over for weeks. The cancellation clause was printed in bold, full refund available if canceled within 21 days of event. I checked the date. We were at exactly 22 days. That meant I still had a window, just barely. I moved to the next contract. The caterer required only 14 days' notice. The photographer required 7. The florist required 10. I had time. Not much, but enough. The thought made my pulse begin to quicken, not with fear, but with purpose. If they didn't want me present, then I would step back completely. I would remove myself from the celebration in the most literal sense, and I would let them discover slowly, painfully, inevitably, what it costs to take someone for granted. Still, I didn't want to act blindly. I needed guidance. I needed facts. So I reached for my phone and called the one person who had always been brutally honest with me, attorney Carla Monroe. Carla had handled my business affairs for years. She was sharp, steady, and allergic to nonsense. When she answered, her tone shifted from casual to alert the moment she heard my voice. "Margaret? Is everything all right?" "Also." "No," I said softly, "but I need your help to make it right." Ingrammed. I didn't go into emotional details. I just laid out the facts. The text message, the financial setup, the contracts, the timeline. Carla listened quietly, occasionally humming in that low way she does when she's forming a legal strategy in real time. When I finished, there was a beat of silence. Then she said, "You have full legal standing to cancel everything." End quote. Her certainty made my shoulders relax just a little. "Even the venue is the present break. Especially the venue," she said. "Your name is the only one on the agreement. They have no legal claim to the booking. They're not contracting parties. They're guests." 2-1. Guests. The word hung in the air like a verdict. Evan and Lena weren't the clients of this wedding. They were the beneficiaries. Without me, there was no event. They didn't seem to understand that when they uninvited me. Carla continued, "If you choose to proceed, I can start making calls today. But Margaret, are you making this decision from anger or clarity?" I closed my eyes. I thought about the text. Derek's voice in Evan's words. Lena nodding like a scared shadow. Evan calling me controlling. Evan forgetting every moment that built his life into something stable. "No," I said. "I'm doing this to remind my grandson what respect looks like. And because I refuse to fund a wedding where I'm treated like an inconvenience." And ding-dang. Carla exhaled, almost in relief. "Then we'll proceed." 2 eyes. She asked me to scan and email all contracts to her office. I organized them into a neat stack, triple-checking signatures and cancellation deadlines. But as I gathered them, something unexpected happened. I found a receipt I didn't recognize, a floral design mock-up from a boutique I didn't remember approving. It listed an upgraded package, premium orchids, imported roses, double arch construction, total $4,800. In a handwriting I recognized as Evan's, there was a note at the bottom. "Margaret won't mind. Charge her card on file." End quote. I stared at the note until it blurred. He didn't even ask. He assumed. He expected. A slow chill crawled up my spine. This wasn't just disrespect. This was entitlement, cultivated deliberately. Before forwarding the documents to Carla, I called the florist to verify the charge. The woman on the line hesitated before answering. "Oh yes, Evan came in last week requesting upgrades. He said you preferred not to be bothered with details." I preferred not to be bothered, as if involvement was the problem, not the erasure, not the manipulation. I thanked her for the information and hung up, my jaw tightening. The puzzle pieces were aligning faster than I expected, and they were forming a picture I didn't want to see. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't miscommunication. This was deliberate distance building, and I needed to know why. So I called the caterer next, and the venue after that. Every call revealed the same truth. Evan and Lena had been making changes, upgrades, and special requests, all under the assumption that I would pay without question. By the time I finished the vendor calls, something solidified inside me, a truth too large to ignore, a truth painful in its simplicity. They didn't just uninvite me, they erased me while spending my money. I sent everything to Carla. She texted back within minutes, "Ready when you are, I gonna ven." But before I gave the final green light, before I let the first domino fall, I sat alone at my table and asked myself one final question. Am I prepared for the fallout? I thought of Evan's face. I thought of the child he had been. I thought of the man he was becoming, or being shaped into. Then I thought of the quiet, painful dignity I had been denying myself for far too long, and I whispered to the empty room, "Yes, I'm ready." I grasped. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have imagined, was that this investigation was only the beginning, because someone else, someone unexpected, was about to enter the picture with information that would shatter everything I thought I understood. Carla told me to sit tight while she reviewed the contracts, but sitting still felt impossible. Something in me had shifted, something that refused to be quiet anymore. So while she handled the legal details, I decided to verify the practical ones. I picked up my notebook, took a deep breath, and dialed the number of the event coordinator at Greenridge Estate. My voice was steady when she answered, but inside, I felt like a cracked vase barely holding together. "Hi, this is Margaret Rowley," I said. "I have a question about the venue booking for the Rowley-Hartman wedding." Where comes to why. There was a pause too long to be polite. "Oh, yes," she finally replied. "We've been expecting a call. Evan mentioned you might reach out." Well, Mager. My stomach tightened. "He did?" End quote. "Yes. He said you were feeling overwhelmed and wanted him to handle the final decisions." Tenaldozing. Overwhelmed. Wanted him to handle things. It was like being slapped with a lie wearing your loved one's voice. I inhaled slowly. "What final decisions?" "Azur." The coordinator hesitated again, then cleared her throat. "Well, the upgrade package he requested last week. The premium lighting design, the additional staging for the ceremony, and the custom aisle installation. He approved all of it, too." "And who did he say would pay for those upgrades?" I asked, though I already knew. "You, of course. He said you didn't want the invoice sent directly to you because wedding planning stressed you out." Also, wedding planning stressed me out. No. People lying right to my face stressed me out. People taking advantage of the love I gave willingly, that was what tore something open inside me. I thanked her and ended the call politely, but my hands shook as I set the phone down. I wasn't shaking from shock anymore. I was shaking from clarity, from anger that had finally found its target. I dialed the caterer next. A cheerful voice answered, and the conversation began normally enough until I asked whether any changes had been made to the menu since I approved it. "Oh yes," the woman said. "Your grandson requested a full upgrade to the luxury tasting option. Imported seafood, specialty wines, premium desserts. He said you insisted on the best and told him not to bother you with the details." I have dot hem. That line again. Don't bother her with the details. A script. I knew now it was a script. I asked for the total. She hesitated before saying it like she felt guilty delivering the number. It was thousands more than what I'd agreed to. I thanked her again, hung up, and sat back in my chair. My entire body felt like it was vibrating, not with rage, but with awakening. I made 2 more calls, one to the decor company, another to the photography team. Both delivered the same story. Evan had approved upgrades. Evan had made new requests. Evan had added custom features for content opportunities and 21/4, and every single time he told them I would pay. Every single time. It was astonishing how quickly entitlement can grow when fed the right mixture of praise and convenience. But the worst part wasn't the money, though the totals were climbing rapidly. It was the lies. The way my grandson had rewritten my role in this wedding to strangers. Not the supportive grandmother who gave willingly, but a frail woman who couldn't handle details, an emotional burden who shouldn't be bothered with braying. That was the part that made my chest ache. Because in the eyes of these vendors, people who had never met me, I had become a caricature designed by someone who didn't want me involved. But who was that someone? Evan? Or the man whispering in his ear like a puppeteer holding strings? The more I thought about Derek, the more things clicked into place. The way he belittled traditional family roles. The way he coached Lena and Evan on brand consistency. The way he acted like gatekeeper to their relationship. He wasn't just influencing them, he was shaping their worldview. And in that worldview, family didn't matter unless it served the narrative. I could feel my heartbeat thudding in my ears as a question formed a question that had been lingering in the back of my mind but was now impossible to ignore. If they were willing to lie this easily to vendors, what else were they hiding? I didn't have long to wonder, because just after I finished the calls, Carla texted me, "Let's talk," end quote. We got on the phone, and she didn't waste time. "Margaret, I'm going to be honest with you. This isn't a wedding problem anymore. This is a respect problem, and respect problems have consequences, too. There are wars, intebrations." I nodded, pacing my kitchen. "I'm ready." She continued. "I've reviewed the entire set of contracts. You have full authority to cancel or modify anything. But before we do that, I need to know something. Do you believe Evan and Lena are doing this maliciously, or are they being manipulated?" I froze. No one had asked me that yet, not even myself. "I don't know," I whispered. But then the memories flooded in, how Evan's tone changed whenever Derek was present, how Lena seemed anxious around him, how decisions made sense only when filtered through Derek's brand-building mindset. "I think someone is influencing them," I finally said. "I don't know how much of this is Evan, and how much is him repeating someone else's words." "I know." Carla hummed again, that low, thoughtful hum. "Then let's keep investigating. Something about this doesn't feel right. People don't uninvite the person funding their wedding unless there's manipulation or something to hide." I have something to hide. The words rooted themselves in my mind, refusing to loosen their grip. I was about to respond when my doorbell rang 3 firm knocks. Unexpected, unfamiliar, urgent. "Carla," I whispered. "Someone's at the door." "A dear. Do you want me to stay on the line?" "Very die. Yes." Is notion. I walked slowly to the door and looked through the peephole. A young woman stood on my porch, clutching a folder to her chest. Her hands were trembling. She looked nervous, but determined. I opened the door halfway. "Can I help you?" "Doc." She swallowed hard. "Are you Margaret Rowley?" "I have gruns." "Yes, I am." She exhaled shakily, as if she'd been holding her breath for days. "I'm sorry to bother you. I know you don't know me. 10 years. She lifted the folder. "But I think you need to see this. It's about Evan." End quote. My stomach dropped. "Who are you?" "However, my name is Emily," she said softly. "And I think your grandson owes me a lot more than he's telling you." Even projected, the world seemed to tilt. I tightened my grip on the doorframe, and she whispered the words that would change everything. "He borrowed money from me. Thousands. And then he disappeared. Dog too." I stood there frozen, one hand on the doorknob, the other holding my phone where Carla was still on the line. The young woman Emily kept clutching that folder like it contained a bomb she wasn't sure she should hand over. For a moment, I didn't say anything. My breath felt heavy, weighted. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Emily looked down, then back up at me. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious," she whispered. "I've tried reaching Evan for months. He blocked me, changed his number. And now I hear he's getting married. So I figured his family should know before someone else gets hurt. It's not round. Before someone else gets hurt." Those words sliced through the air like a cold knife. I stepped aside slowly. "Come in." "I have decided it." She entered my living room cautiously, as if afraid of intruding. She sat on the edge of the sofa, legs shaking, the folder still in her grip. I stayed standing for a moment, grounding myself. Carla's voice whispered from my phone. "Keep calm. Listen first, Jester 9. So I sat down across from Emily and folded my hands in my lap. "Tell me what happened." "It's a grade," Emily swallowed. "I met Evan 2 years ago. I thought we were something. He told me he was building a business, something big. He said he needed capital, just until the brand partnerships came through." I said, my stomach tightened. Brand partnerships. The same words Derek used every time he talked about Evan's future. "How much did he take from you?" I asked quietly. She opened the folder. Inside were bank transfers, text messages, handwritten notes, dozens of them. In total? About $9,000. In the DIDU. 9,000. My breath caught. She continued. He said he would pay me back once he finalized a big sponsorship deal. But then, he started avoiding me, ghosting me. And finally, he blocked me. All of it. Phone, email, social media, to my ass. I clenched my jaw, trying to stay composed. And you're certain it was Evan? If you would? He signed 2 promissory notes, she said, sliding them toward me. His signature, his handwriting, and he told me word for word, you're the only one I can trust. That sentence hit me harder than all the numbers combined. He used trust like currency, like air, like something disposable. I scanned the documents. They were real. They were legitimate, and worst of all, they were intentional. Emily's voice cracked. I wasn't going to come forward. I didn't want to embarrass him. But when I heard he was marrying into money, I realized he was never going to pay me back, and I thought he might do it again. To her, to someone else. The room fell silent. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to stop. Finally, I looked up. Emily, thank you for coming. I know this must be painful. Dubray did. She shook her head. Painful was the moment I realized he never saw me as a person, just a resource. Is Forded weighted? I felt that like a punch, because suddenly everything clicked. The disrespect, the lies, the manipulation, the wedding upgrades behind my back, the text uninviting me. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about a pattern, a long, calculated pattern of using people until they were empty and then discarding them. I asked softly, does Lena know about this? Emily's face fell. No. And I don't think she'd believe me. Avanin knowed. I inhaled sharply. That answer was too familiar, too close to what I felt in my own bones. Carla's voice murmured quietly from my phone speaker. Margaret, this changes everything. If you have to. I told Emily I wanted to help her recover her money if possible, and that I would handle things from here. She thanked me, and as she stood to leave, she hesitated. There's one more thing, she whispered. I braced myself. What is it? She pulled out a photo one printed from a phone screen. This is Derek, she said. I don't know if you know him, but he and Evan used to talk a lot about the plan. I never understood it, but they always said the same phrase. Once this wedding comes through, everything changes. Dumb. Everything changes. My blood ran cold. That wasn't a phrase young men in love used. That was a phrase people used when strategizing, when plotting, when calculating outcomes that had nothing to do with emotion. I watched Emily walk down my driveway, her shoulders hunched under the weight of 2 years of betrayal. And when she disappeared from view, I shut the door quietly, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the wood. Carla's voice broke the silence. Do you see the pattern now? Today. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. He's not just being influenced. He's part of something. I was Dewey. Exactly, she said. And if there's money involved, other people's money, it won't stop here. End quote. I turned slowly toward my dining table, where all the vendor contracts lay stacked in neat piles. Suddenly, the wedding wasn't just a wedding. It was leverage. It was branding. It was a revenue stream. And I was the bank. But that was no longer the part that shook me. What shook me was the dawning realization that Evan's manipulation was deeper, older, and colder than I ever imagined. I whispered the thought aloud without meaning to. If he could do this to her, what else has he been hiding from me? Carla didn't hesitate. Margaret, you need answers. And you're going to get them. But the next step won't happen quietly. This is going to blow open much bigger than a cancelled wedding. I read Devrown. I closed my eyes. Because I already knew she was right. And I already knew exactly where I had to go next. To the one person who had been pulling strings behind the scenes. The drive to Derek's apartment felt longer than it really was. Streets I'd driven 100 times before suddenly felt unfamiliar, almost hostile. My hands gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly. My jaw clenched in a way I couldn't relax. I wasn't going there to argue. I wasn't going there to scold a young man who thought he knew everything. I was going there for the truth, whatever form it came in. And I had the sinking feeling that this truth wasn't going to be gentle. When I parked outside Derek's downtown loft, I sat in the car for a moment, steadying my breath. His building wasn't the kind young people lived in when they were struggling. It was the kind they lived in when they were living off someone else's confidence and someone else's money. The lobby was lined with modern art I didn't recognize, and furniture that looked like the word comfort had never been in its design vocabulary. But the moment the elevator doors opened on the 6th floor and I stepped out, I heard voices Evan's and Derek's through the hallway. Loud, agitated, close. I didn't knock. Not this time. I walked straight in, and the door wasn't even locked. Evan spun around like he'd seen a ghost. Derek didn't turn at all. He just leaned back against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, studying me with a calmness I immediately recognized. Calculation. "Grandma? What are you doing here?" Evan blurted, voice too high, too shaky. I closed the door behind me, looking for answers. "Great Marled," Derek smirked. Not a smile, just a thin curl of the lip, the kind people use when they don't take you seriously. "Margaret, this is unexpected." Quote, "Not as unexpected as the call I got this morning," I replied, placing the folder Emily had given me on the counter. "Why don't you both take a look?" "If you crossed Daler," Evan blinked. "What is that?" I have asked. "Evidence," I said, "of money you borrowed from someone you ghosted." Quote, his eyes widened as he recognized the paperwork. "Grandma, I can explain," but Derek interrupted, his tone calm and almost bored. "You don't owe her an explanation, not for something that happened before you started building your future." "I have." I turned slowly toward him. "Before he started building his future? On what? My money? Her money? Lena's?" "I know." Derek finally stood upright, his expression sharpening. "You're overreacting. Evan has been under a lot of pressure to succeed. Sometimes people make desperate choices. It doesn't mean anything." "It's Russian rights." A wave of cold anger washed over me. "Desperate choices mean something when they involve deception. And have you not reigned?" Evan stepped forward, panicked. "Please, Grandma, this isn't what it looks like. I borrowed the money when I was trying to deal with my credit issues." "Your credit issues?" I repeated. "You told me yours were perfect." "8." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He had no answer. Derek sighed dramatically. "Margaret, I think you're misunderstanding Evan's situation. He's been working very hard to build the Rowley-Hartman brand." I cut him off. "Say that phrase again." "Is not as in," he blinked. "What?" I was Didway. "Go on, repeat it." He looked irritated. "The Rowley-Hartman brand. It's what they're building. Their wedding is part of that strategy." I felt something inside me click, something cold, something unwavering. "So that's what this wedding is to you," I said quietly. "A strategy, a brand moment, a revenue opportunity. Is no of them." Evan shook his head quickly. "No, it's not like that." But Derek didn't deny it. He only smiled. And that smile told me everything I needed to know. I walked closer, my voice steady. "Emily said, you and Evan talked about the plan, that the wedding was going to change everything. What exactly did you mean by that?" "I thank you." Evan froze. Derek didn't blink. He simply picked up the folder, flipped through the pages, and said, "It's not illegal to strategize." Strategize. My hands curled into fists. "You manipulated him," I said. "You built an entire narrative about independence, success, and image, and then convinced him to cut the people who actually cared about him out of his life." End forwarded. Derek finally lost the smirk. "You're confusing influence with interference. I've simply shown Evan how to prioritize his future. His life was stagnant before I stepped in." As note, stagnant. That word made my blood boil. My grandson wasn't stagnant, I snapped. He was loved, supported, encouraged. And you decided he'd be more profitable without that. Derek shrugged. "Profitability is power. You wouldn't understand, too." "Oh, I understand perfectly." "I'm over." I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a steady, lethal calm. "You think you're smarter than everyone around you. You think you're untouchable. But you forgot something. People like you always forget something." He raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" I leaned forward. "Your entire plan depends on one thing. My money." End quote. A flicker of irritation, maybe even fear, crossed his face. just for a moment. Evan swallowed hard. Grandma, please, be quiet, Derek ordered sharply. And that was his second mistake. I turned to Evan, my voice softened but firm. Sweetheart, when did you start listening to him instead of to your own conscience? When did you become someone who ghosted women, borrowed money under false promises, and tried to push away the family that raised you? Indaliment. Evan's eyes filled with tears. He looked like a child again. Not the manipulative stranger who'd uninvited me, but the boy I'd loved for his entire life, the one who'd gotten lost somewhere along the way. Derek stepped between us. This conversation is over. I can on the dime. No, I said, stepping around him. It's just beginning. I haven't. I set my purse on the counter, pulled out a stack of printed emails, receipts, and cancellation confirmations. Every vendor has been canceled, I said clearly. Evan gasped. Grandma. Well, Derek sputtered. You can't do that. I already did. To 4 pieces. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, cold. I could hear my own breathing. Then I spoke the one sentence that shattered the room. And tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with Lena and her parents. It's... Evan's face went pale. Derek's jaw tightened. I leaned in just enough for him to see the truth in my eyes. You wanted a public moment? A spectacle? A breaking point? You're about to get one. We are S. And with that, I turned, picked up my purse, and walked out. Behind me, I heard Derek whisper venomously, "This isn't over." Also wasn't to go hada, but he was wrong. It was over. For him. For his plan. For the wedding that was never really a wedding. What wasn't over was the truth that was about to hit daylight for the first time. The Hartmans lived in a beautiful old brick house on Willowcrest Drive, the kind of place that felt warm even before you walked inside. I'd been there dozens of times, birthdays, holiday dinners, the occasional emergency babysitting night. But driving there now felt different, heavier, like I was carrying a truth too big to hold quietly. I'd canceled every vendor, confronted Derek, uncovered Evan's lies. But this meeting, this moment, was the one that would pull the curtain all the way back, and I was stepping into it alone. When I rang the doorbell, Lena's mother, Diane, opened the door. Her face held that polite smile people wear when they're expecting small talk, not the storm I was about to bring in with me. "Margaret, come in, come in. Everything all right? You sounded urgent." "It's finded in 44. Everything all right?" What a gentle, innocent question. I stepped inside. Lena and her father were already in the living room. Lena looked anxious, like she'd spent the whole morning trying to hold something together with invisible string. Her father, Mark, set down the newspaper and stood as I walked in. I didn't sit immediately. I couldn't. Not with what I had to say. "I need to talk to all of you," I began, my voice steady but not soft. "It's about the wedding, and about Evan." "And..." Lena took a shallow breath. "Is this about the text he sent you? He told me he explained everything." "No," I said, "this is bigger than that." I cowered. Diane frowned. "Margaret, you're scaring me." "It's not a venter. I'm sorry," I whispered. "But you deserve the truth." "About." I opened the folder I'd brought, the one with Emily's evidence, the vendor notes, printed screenshots, the cancellation documents. I laid it all on the coffee table. Lena looked down at the papers, confusion shifting into fear. What is all this?" End quote. I didn't ease into it. Kindness sometimes means being gentle, but today, kindness meant cutting through deceit before it destroyed more lives. "This," I said, tapping the promissory note, "is proof that Evan borrowed nearly $10,000 from another woman, a woman he was seeing while he promised you he was building a life with you." I brayed. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. Mark's face darkened. But Lena just stared at the page as though she couldn't understand the symbols printed on it. No, that's not. There has to be a mistake. It's Breenfinenders. I wish that were true," I said quietly. "But he signed these. He wrote these messages. He told her she was the only one he could trust. And when she asked for repayment, he blocked her." Wait. Lena's breath hitched. Her world, this future she'd been shaping like a delicate sculpture, was cracking in front of her. And I wasn't done. "There's more," I continued. "And you need to hear all of it. Not later, now. To have." I explained the vendor upgrades, the lies about not bothering me. I have a time. The pattern of manipulating payments, the financial plan he and Derek had been building around the wedding, how they saw it as a brand opportunity, not a marriage. But when I said the phrase, the plan, Lena finally broke. Her shoulders shook, and she covered her face. I knew something felt wrong, she whispered. I kept telling Evan I wanted a small wedding, that all this felt too big, too forced. And he said I didn't understand the vision. He said Derek knew how to make us successful. He said you were holding us back, Tennel, holding them back. I felt the sting of those words land on her like they'd been sharpened. Diane wrapped an arm around her daughter. Lena, sweetheart, you should have told us. I didn't want to ruin things, Lena cried. I thought I was overthinking. Evan kept telling me my family didn't get us, in quote. I sat down beside her, gently placing a hand on her knee. People who isolate you, I said softly, are never protecting you. I'm Maya, she nodded through tears. And then her father spoke, voice low, controlled, but burning. Margaret, why are you just telling us now? Why didn't you come to us sooner? Very times to the combining 80 times. I looked him directly in the eye, because I didn't have the truth until yesterday. With 2 in 12. I hesitated before adding. But when I got it, I acted immediately. Every vendor is cancelled, every contract withdrawn, and the wedding cannot proceed not under these circumstances. 1. The room went still, silent, heavy. Then Lena whispered, he's going to be furious. I shook my head. No, Lena, he's going to be exposed. If see of a longed event other loaning. She lifted her face, streaked with tears. What do? I was no to. You do nothing until you've seen him clearly, I said. And you're going to see him clearly today, because right then, right on cue, the front door opened. A voice echoed through the hallway. Hey babe, I grabbed coffee for. Evan walked into the living room, saw all of us, saw the papers, saw the expressions, and froze. Time seemed to stretch. No one moved, no one breathed. Then Lena stood up. Her voice shook. Evan, what did you do? Is Baidu. He looked at the papers, panic blooming in his eyes. Lena, listen, this isn't what you think. It's exactly what I think, she said, her voice cracking. All of it. The lies, the money, the manipulation, the wedding, everything. I'm said. Evan turned to me, desperate. Grandma, please. I stood slowly, and I said the one sentence that detonated everything. No more lies, Evan. Not today. His jaw tightened. You had no right? I had every right, I said, my voice unshakable, because I'm the one you exploited. I'm the one you deceived. And I'm the one who just saved your fiancée from spending her entire life tied to a man she couldn't trust. I fell. Derek wasn't here to save him. No script, no strategy, no brand, just truth. Raw and undeniable. Evan's face finally crumpled. He whispered, it wasn't supposed to go like this. Bright out. I stepped closer. How is it supposed to go, sweetheart? You get the money, the wedding, the brand deals, and I stay quiet while you build your future on lies? It started raid. He couldn't answer. He didn't have one. Lena sank onto the sofa, trembling. And that was when Diane, this soft-spoken woman I'd known for years, finally rose with fury I had never seen in her eyes. Evan Rowley, she said, voice sharp and trembling, you need to leave this house. Now. Is Dode. He stared at her, stunned. Mrs. Hartman, please just hear me out. Get out. Ever. Her voice cracked like lightning. Evan backed toward the door, breath shaking, eyes red. He looked at me one last time. You ruined everything. To that it hadda. I shook my head. No, Evan. I stopped you from ruining her. Is real. And then he was gone. The door slammed behind him. The silence that followed was the kind that carries truths too heavy to speak yet. But the damage, the truth, the exposure, it was finally out. And nothing would ever be the same again. Evan didn't just leave the Hartman house, he exploded out of it. I could hear his car engine rev from inside the living room, the sound of tires scraping against the curb as he sped away. For a moment, none of us spoke. Lena was still shaking, leaning into her mother, and Mark was pacing the room like a man trying to process a fire that had started in his own hands. I felt a strange calm settle over me, a quiet, heavy clarity, the kind that comes only after truth detonates. But the peace didn't last long. My phone buzzed. Once, Twice. A third time, I stepped aside and looked down. Evan had sent 7 messages in less than a minute. All variations of, "Why would you do this?" in 2-way. "You embarrassed me." "Where? You ruined everything. If you don't up, you don't understand the plan. I know 9. I need you to fix this." End quote. Fix this. Even now, he wanted me to fix it. Not apologize, not take responsibility. Just repair the fallout of his own choices. Before I could respond, an 8th message came through. "Derek is on his way to your house. He's going to explain everything." 18. I felt the hairs rise on the back of my neck. Explain everything? No, Derek didn't explain. Is resaid on a screed. Derek controlled. Derek shaped narratives. Derek rewrote reality around people too young or too hopeful to see the strings. I slipped my phone into my purse. "I need to go," I told the Hartmans. "This isn't over." "I want to." Diane grabbed my hand. "Margaret, be careful." "I'm Selv." "I will," I promised, though I wasn't sure what careful would even look like anymore. The showdown at my door. When I drove home, Derek was already waiting. Not knocking, not pacing, just standing on my porch with his hands in his pockets like he'd been rehearsing his lines. He turned as I stepped out of the car, the faint smirk already in place. "Margaret, we need to talk." I walked right past him and unlocked my door. "If you have something to say, you can say it inside where the neighbors won't hear." That wiped the smirk off his face. He followed me in, closing the door behind him with a soft click, far too quiet for the storm he brought with him. The moment we were in the kitchen, he went straight into performance mode. "You blindsided Evan today. What you did was completely inappropriate. You embarrassed him in front of his future in-laws. Do you understand the damage you've caused?" I didn't sit. I didn't soften. I didn't smile. "Yes," I said. "I stopped a young woman from marrying a liar." His jaw tensed. "That's not what this is." Evan was under pressure, heavy pressure. You created some of that pressure by insisting on old-fashioned expectations. You pushed him to hide things. I raised one eyebrow. $9,000 of someone else's money? Was that my fault too? He didn't blink, not even once. People borrow money all the time. She shouldn't have given it if she couldn't afford to lose it. And there it was. The truth under his manufactured calm, the rot under his charm. "That woman," I said slowly, "is the reason I know exactly who he is now." Derek stepped forward, lowering his voice like he was about to hypnotize me. "Margaret, listen. Don't let one emotional girl cloud your judgment. You and Evan have a chance to turn this around. The wedding is salvageable if you stop acting impulsively." "Impulsively?" I said. "I've watched you isolate him for months." His lips tightened. "You're confusing support with strategy." "No," I said. "I'm identifying manipulation." His voice sharpened. "You need to reinstate the wedding vendors. Today." I laughed. It wasn't intentional, but it came out anyway. "You think you can walk into my home and give me orders?" His eyes flashed just for a moment with something cold, cruel, something that made my skin crawl. "I'm the only person keeping Evan's future intact," he snapped. "And you're destroying it. If this wedding falls apart, so does everything we've built." There it was. We've built, not Evan, not Lena. You're not building anything," I said. "You're using him." He stepped closer, too close. "You are making a mistake you can't undo." I held his stare. And then, very slowly, I reached for my purse and took out the stack of vendor cancellations. I placed them between us on the counter. "It's already done." His face changed. Not a flicker now, this was full, unmasked fury. "You have no idea what you've started." "Yes," I said softly. "I do." I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. "I recorded every word you just said." His expression shattered, an exposed nerve, a trapped animal. "You what? You recorded? That's illegal. You can't." "It's legal in this state," I said. "One-party consent, and I'm the party." He froze completely. "And Derek," I leaned forward. "The next person I'm sending this to is Lena. And then to her parents. And then to my attorney." His voice broke. "You can't do that." "I already did." In truth, I hadn't sent it yet. Not then. But he didn't need to know that. He backed away half a step, breathing hard. "You're destroying careers, lives, futures." "No," I said again, calm returning to my bones. "I'm preventing a crime." Legal motion, the first shift. He left without another word. And when the door closed behind him, the silence in my home felt different, not heavy, not hopeless. More like a battlefield after smoke clears. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. Carla. Margaret, she said. I just heard from a colleague on the ethics board. Derek filed a complaint accusing you of harassment. He claims you're having a mental episode and sabotaging Evan's life. I said, Of course he did. Don't worry, she continued. His claim has no legal teeth. But I think you should know something. She paused. He has a record. My spine went rigid. A record? Yes. 2 sealed warnings from a previous workplace for coercive behavior. 1 complaint involving financial exploitation. Nothing that led to charges, but he has a pattern, a familiar one, a destructive one. And there's more, Carla added. I think Evan may have signed documents under Derek's direction that could be used for fraud. Fraud. The word hit like a cold gust of wind. This is going to get worse before it gets better, she said gently. But you did the right thing. Everything is shifting now. Yes, shifting, unraveling, exposing. The wedding had collapsed. The truth was out, and justice had finally stepped into the room. The next morning began with a kind of hush, an uneasy quiet that felt almost unnatural, not peaceful, just expectant, like the world had paused for half a second before something heavy dropped. And it did drop, faster than I imagined. At 7:12 a.m., Lena texted me 3 words that made my breath catch. It's everywhere. I sat up straighter in bed. What's everywhere? I typed back, already fearing the answer. A moment later, she sent a link, a public post, dozens of comments already, then hundreds, growing faster than I could scroll. Someone, maybe one of her friends, maybe someone inside their social circle, had shared screenshots of Derek's recorded threats, my vendor cancellations, Emily's messages, and a summary of the meltdown at the Hartman's house. Names were redacted, but the story? Unmistakable. The title alone was brutal. Man exposed for exploiting fiancé and grandmother for cash, wedding cancelled. My hands trembled. I hadn't shared the recording. Neither had Lena. Neither had Carla. This came from somewhere else. Lena called, voice trembling. I didn't post it. I swear, but someone must have overheard what happened yesterday. Or maybe Emily told someone. Or, I stopped her. It doesn't matter who posted it right now. What matters is what's true. And every word in that post, every detail, painfully, embarrassingly, undeniably true. The internet takes sides. By 8 a.m., it had spread across multiple local forums. By 9 a.m., TikTok commentary began popping up, people stitching the screenshots with captions like, "This is why you don't ditch your grandma who pays for your wedding. Imagine ghosting someone who gave you $10K and your grandma? Jail. That friend Derek sounds like the real puppet master here." By noon, people had started making entire discussion threads analyzing the manipulation pipeline. And by late afternoon, the story made it to a mid-sized true crime commentary channel. The community wasn't confused. They weren't undecided. They were furious. And their anger wasn't directed at me or at Lena. It was directed at Evan, and even more so, at Derek. The first fallout. At 3 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Lena. It wasn't the Hartmans. It wasn't Carla. It was Evan's employer. "Mrs. Rowley, I'm sorry to bother you, but we need to confirm something regarding Evan's association with your family. A situation involving alleged debt, coercion, and vendor fraud has surfaced. We've put him on immediate administrative leave pending investigation." I pressed a hand to my forehead. They'd found it. I chose my next words carefully. I can't comment on online speculation, but I will say this. What's circulating is not fabricated. Silence. Then, that's very helpful. Thank you. Helpful. The word tasted strange in that context. They ended the call. I sat staring at the wall for a long moment, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and a quiet acceptance that consequences had finally stepped out of the shadows. But the day wasn't done with me yet. Derek strikes back. At 5:41 p.m., a certified letter was shoved into my mailbox. No envelope, just a thick, legal-looking packet stuffed in with enough force to bend the metal. I opened it right there at the curb. A cease and desist letter. Not from an attorney, from Derek, who had apparently created a professional letterhead for himself, complete with a logo and a motto that made me snort out loud. Building the future with precision. Inside the letter, he accused me of defamation, harassment, interference with economic opportunity, family sabotage, and my personal favorite, malicious emotional destabilization. It was laughable, ridiculous, utterly unserious. But at the bottom, in shaky writing, was the part I couldn't ignore. If you do not withdraw your accusations, I will pursue legal action against you and ensure Evan presses charges. I took the packet inside and called Carla. Her reaction? Unfiltered laughter. Oh, Margaret, this is pathetic. He didn't even cite actual statutes. He just made up phrases that sounded legal. What do I do with it? I asked. Keep it, she said. Judges love seeing this kind of amateur nonsense. It builds credibility for your side. But as amused as she was, her tone shifted when she added, however, brace yourself. If Derek feels cornered, he may escalate. And then the big twist came. That night, just after 8 p.m., Carla called again. But this time, her voice wasn't amused. It was sharp, tight, focused. Margaret, we have a problem. My shoulders stiffened. What is it? I've been digging deeper into Derek's past. A pause. He's not just manipulative. He's not just coercive. Another pause. He has a financial misconduct alert filed with the state, a flagged complaint, and if what I'm piecing together is right, he may be under informal review by a regulatory board. I felt myself go still, completely still. Carla, what does that mean? It means he may have used Evan's name financially. He may have had Evan sign things he didn't understand. Possibly contracts, possibly authorizations, possibly loan applications. My heart dropped. Are you saying Evan might be tied to fraud? Maybe unintentionally. Maybe intentionally. We don't know yet. Her voice lowered. But here's the legal twist you need to hear. If Derek used Evan for financial gain, Evan is not just a culprit. He may be a victim. I sat down slowly, the weight of her words sinking in like cold water. Victim. The boy who had lied, manipulated, borrowed money, disrespected me, cut me out of his life, could also have been used by someone far more dangerous. Carla continued, and if that's the case, Margaret, we're not just dealing with a ruined wedding anymore. We're dealing with a potential financial crime ring. My breath caught. And you, she added softly, may have shut down the pipeline without even realizing it. I stared at the wall. Numb. The wedding wasn't the scheme. It was just one part of something much bigger, much darker, much more dangerous. And Derek? He wasn't crashing Evan's life. He was building something through him, and I had just finally broken it open. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw pieces of the puzzle rearranging themselves. Evan's lies, Emily's debt, Derek's manipulation, the wedding strategy, the cancellations, the threats, the internet wildfire. Carla's voice echoed in my mind. If Derek used Evan for financial gain, he may be a victim too. Victim. The word gnawed at me. It didn't erase what Evan had done. It didn't excuse the disrespect, but it forced me to see the possibility that he wasn't the architect of all this. Only a brick misplaced by someone else's hand. Around 10 a.m. My doorbell rang. For a split second, my heart lurched, expecting Derek, expecting fury, expecting more chaos. But when I opened the door, it wasn't him. It was two men in plain suits, badges clipped discreetly to their belts, their expressions calm but purposeful. Mrs. Rowley? One of them asked. Yes. I'm Special Agent Ross with the Financial Integrity Task Unit. This is Agent Navarro. We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding an individual named Derek Hale. My breath left my body. The room tilted. It was happening, faster than I could have imagined. Of course, I said, stepping aside. Come in. The questions that changed everything. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd signed checks for Evan's wedding, the same table where I'd canceled every vendor, the same table where my world had flipped upside down. Agent Ross opened a folder. Mrs. Rowley, do you happen to know whether Derek Hale has asked your grandson to sign financial documents in the past year? I blinked. Financial documents? I don't know. Evan never told me. Have you seen anything unusual? Calls from creditors? Strange charges? Mail addressed to Evan under new accounts? I thought back. The unopened mail Evan left in my guest room once. The envelopes marked, "Final Notice." The ones he shoved quickly into his backpack when he thought I wasn't looking. The tension in his shoulders that day. "Yes," I said softly. "There were letters. I didn't know what they were." "He hid them from me." Agent Navarro nodded slowly. "That aligns with what we've gathered. Derek has a pattern of convincing young men to build credit by signing loan applications he later intercepts. The loans default, they take the hit, he stays clean." I felt sick, physically sick. So Evan, Agent Ross finished my thought, may already be tied to several accounts he never understood. We believe Derek groomed him for this purpose. Groomed. The word punched the air out of my lungs, not romantically, not emotionally, financially, strategically, predatorily. "How long has this investigation been happening?" I whispered. "A year," Ross replied. "But we didn't have a confirmed victim who'd cooperate. Derek is careful. He isolates, manipulates, uses shame as leverage. But the online exposure yesterday, he exchanged a glance with Navarro, gave us exactly what we needed. Because of the post, because the truth spread, because I confronted him, because I canceled the wedding. I didn't know whether to cry or breathe easier." "Where is Evan?" Navarro asked. "We've been trying to reach him since this morning. He's not answering calls." My lips pressed tight. "I haven't seen him since yesterday." "He ran out of Lena's house," Ross said. "He may be hiding, out of fear, or because Derek is pushing him to disappear." Disappear. The thought chilled me to the bone. Evan finally breaks. That afternoon, at 2:17 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "Grandma?" My heart clenched. "Evan? Where are you? Are you safe?" A shaky breath. Cars in the background. Wind hitting the phone speaker. I messed up. I really messed up." His voice cracked, raw, unfiltered, terrified. "He said he'd take care of it. He said I didn't have to worry. He said I'd be successful if I just trusted him." I closed my eyes. "Oh, sweetheart. He made me sign things," Evan whispered. "Contracts, approvals, stuff I didn't even read. He said it was for brand partnerships. I didn't want to look stupid, so I signed. I didn't know what they were." He was crying now. Not angry tears, not defensive tears. The tears of someone realizing the trap only when the jaws snapped shut. "Where are you?" I asked. "I'm in my car, at the edge of town." I didn't know where else to go. "Listen to me," I said gently. "Stay where you are. I'm sending help. Agents are investigating Derek. You're not alone in this. Not anymore." He sobbed. "I didn't mean to hurt Lena. Or you. I thought he believed in me. No one has ever believed in me like that." And there it was. The real hook Derek had used. Not money. Not opportunity. Not branding. Validation. The most powerful weapon in the world when used by the wrong hands. "I'm coming to you," I said. "No," he choked. "Grandma, he's looking for me. He called 20 times. He said if I talked to anyone, he'd." The line cut, abruptly. My heart lurched. "Evan? Evan?" No answer. And then Derek disappeared. Agents Ross and Navarro moved fast. Within minutes, they traced the last ping of Evan's phone. Within an hour, they were canvassing the outskirts of town. But Derek? He was already gone. By evening, a BOLO, be on lookout alert, had been issued for his vehicle. Agents believed he was running from more than just the wedding fallout. He was running from federal exposure, from victims stepping forward, from everything he built collapsing in a single day. And Evan, my grandson, was lost somewhere in the middle of it all, used, manipulated, broken open. But finally, telling the truth. As night settled across my living room, I sat alone with nothing but the ticking of the clock and the fading echo of his voice. And I made a vow right then, aloud, to the empty room. I will not let Derek ruin him. Not one more day, not one more breath, not one more lie. The walls were closing in, and the truth, the whole truth, was finally stepping into the light. Night had already settled across town when the agents left my house, promising they'd call the moment they located Evan. I tried sitting, but quiet made my nerves worse. I tried pacing, but movement only made the dread churn faster. I felt like a wire pulled too tight, vibrating with every passing minute. My grandson was out there somewhere, scared, manipulated, finally waking up to the weight of his own choices, and Derek was hunting him like a cornered animal. Around 9:40 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. My heart jumped into my throat. Mrs. Rowley? A calm voice. Agent Navarro. We found Evan's car. I exhaled shakily. Where? Is he all right? It was abandoned near the Westbridge walking trail. The keys were on the driver's seat. We're searching the area now. We'll update you as soon as... In the background, I heard someone shout. Navarro paused. Then, hold on. They think they've found him. My pulse hammered so hard I could barely breathe. After a low, muffled exchange, Navarro returned to the line. Mrs. Rowley, he's alive. He's shaken, disoriented but unharmed. I closed my eyes, whispered thanks I hadn't prayed in years. Can I see him? I asked, voice trembling. I'll text you the location. We'll wait. The first real break in the darkness. When I arrived, the walking trail was lit by police flashlights and the faint glow of street lamps. Evan sat on a bench wrapped in a thermal blanket, his face pale, streaked with dirt and tears. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but spiritually, like someone who'd been emptied out too quickly. The moment he saw me, he broke down. Grandma, his voice cracked in half. I immediately wrapped my arms around him, felt his shoulders trembling beneath the blanket. You're safe, I whispered, stroking his hair like I used to when he was 7. You're safe now. I didn't know where to go, he sobbed. He kept calling, telling me not to talk to anyone, telling me I ruined everything, that I owed him. You don't owe him anything, I said firmly, pulling back just enough to look him in the eyes. You owe yourself the truth, and that starts today. He nodded, though the fear in his eyes lingered like a shadow that didn't know where to settle. Agent Ross approached. Evan, can you tell us what happened after you left your grandmother's? Evan wiped his face with the blanket. I drove for hours. I didn't know what to do. Derek kept blowing up my phone, 20 calls, 30, I don't know. He said if I told anyone what he made me sign, he'd drag me down with him, that he'd tell people I was in on it. Ross exchanged a look with Navarro. That was confirmation. Exactly the kind of coercion they needed to prove. Evan, Ross said gently, you need to know something important. Derek is already under investigation. You are not the target here, but you are crucial to stopping him. Evan swallowed hard. So, I'm not going to jail? Not if you cooperate fully, Ross replied. And not if what you're saying is true. Evan buried his face in his hands. I was so stupid. He made me feel like I mattered, like I could be someone. My heart ached, not for the choices he'd made, though those scars still hurt, but for the boy underneath all of it, the boy who'd been starving for belonging, the boy Derek had used like a tool. Sweetheart, I whispered, real love never demands secrecy or lies. Real mentors don't isolate you. Real friends don't use your insecurities as leverage. He nodded slowly. And then Derek's shadow returned. Just as we were gathering to take Evan home, Agent Navarro's radio crackled. A voice rushed through. We've got movement near the trailhead. Male, mid-30s, matching Hale's description. Approaching on foot. Fast. Evan froze. His knuckles tightened around the blanket. His eyes went wide. He's here. Ross turned sharply. Get him behind the patrol car. Everything happened fast after that. Officers moved. Flashlights sliced through the darkness. A low voice echoed from the trail entrance. Yvonne. It was him, Derek. And even from dozens of feet away, I could hear the fury ripping through his tone. You idiot. What did you tell them? What did you do? Evan instinctively stepped closer to me, like his body finally recognized where safety lived. Agent Navarro lifted a hand. Hale, stop where you are. But Derek didn't stop, didn't slow. He threw his hands up in a mocking gesture. Oh, come on. You think I'm scared of a couple of basement agents? Evan, get over here. Now. No, Evan whispered. The first true no I'd heard from him in months. Derek snarled. And that's your grandmother's doing. She has poisoned you. She has destroyed everything we built. You think these people care about you? They're going to throw you under the bus. Agent Ross stepped between us. Hale, we're placing you under investigative detainment for... Derek cut him off. You have nothing. Evan signed willingly. All of it. Every document. Every authorization. He's the one on the hook, not me. Evan shook his head violently. You told me they were brand partnerships. Oh, please, Derek spat. You think ignorance protects you? Grow up. That was it. The final line. Ross's voice boomed. Derek Hale, you are being detained pending investigation for coercive fraud, misuse of financial identity, and intent to defraud an elder sponsor. Derek's face twisted. Elder sponsor? You mean her? He pointed at me, sneering. Ross didn't blink. Yes, her. Derek lunged forward, wild and reckless, but 3 officers restrained him instantly, pinning his arms. He was screaming the entire time. You're nothing without me, Evan. Nothing. And in that moment, something inside my grandson broke, but in a good way. A necessary way. A way that cracked the last chain Derek had around him. Evan stepped out from behind the patrol car, voice trembling but strong. No, Derek. I'm nothing because of you. And I'm done. Derek stopped shouting, just stared at him. Stunned, silent, powerless. Officers tightened the cuffs. Navarro signaled the patrol car. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Derek Hale was off the street. The beginning of healing. When they drove Derek away, Evan collapsed onto the bench again, exhausted, shaking, emptied out. I sat beside him, pulled him into my arms, and let him cry into my shoulder. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I hurt you. I hurt Lena. I hurt myself. Apology is the first step, I said softly. The second is rebuilding, and you don't have to do that alone. He looked up, red-eyed and small but finally honest. Will you help me? I squeezed his hand. Always. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I saw the boy I used to know. Not perfect, not healed, not redeemed, but reachable, and that was enough to take the next step forward. The morning after Derek's arrest felt strangely calm, almost too calm, like the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Evan slept in my guest room, curled up under the old quilt his grandfather used to love. When I checked on him, I saw something I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. Not peace, exactly, but release, a loosening, a letting go of something that had been wrapped around him like a noose. I brewed coffee while the sunlight crept across my kitchen tiles. I knew today needed to happen. Evan knew it too. There was one person he had to face, a wound he had to own before any real healing could begin. Lena. Around noon, he walked into the kitchen, his hair a mess, his shoulders slumped. He looked older than he had yesterday, but in a way that made him seem more real, more human. Grandma. His voice was small. I'm scared. I know, I said gently, but fear is what keeps us honest. And honesty is the only thing that will save what's left. He nodded slowly. I want to try. I want to apologize the right way. Not the way Derek taught me to lie or perform. I want to actually mean it. I believe you. He exhaled shakily, like he'd been holding his breath all night. Can you come with me? Of course, I said. But you're the one who has to speak. He nodded again, and we left. The door that didn't open right away. We drove to the Hartman's house in silence. Not angry silence. Not bitter silence. Just the quiet of 2 people gathering courage one breath at a time. When we pulled up, Lena's mother, Diane, was already outside watering her rose bushes. She froze when she saw my car, her eyes flicking from me to Evan with a complicated mix of hurt and sympathy. Mrs. Hartman, Evan whispered, stepping out of the car. She straightened slowly. Evan. Her tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't warm either. It was the tone of a woman trying to figure out what pieces were worth picking back up. Is Lena home? He asked. Diane hesitated before answering. She is, but she's fragile. I know, he whispered. I'm here because she deserves the truth. All of it. Diane studied him for a moment, his trembling hands, his red eyes, the way he kept glancing down like he couldn't bear the weight of her gaze. Finally, she nodded toward the door. She's in the living room. But Evan, she paused. Respect her boundaries. If she asks you to leave, you leave. I will, he said softly. I promise. The conversation that broke and mended. Lena sat on the edge of the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes swollen from crying. When Evan walked in, she didn't look up immediately. She stared at her hands like the truth might be written in her palms if she searched hard enough. Lena, Evan said, voice cracking. Thank you for seeing me. She finally looked up, and the pain in her expression almost made me reach for her. But this wasn't my moment. This was theirs. I stood quietly in the corner, present but invisible. "Say what you came to say," she whispered. Evan swallowed, then spoke. "I lied to you. I hid things from you. I hurt you in ways I can't take back. And it wasn't just the money. It was trust. Your trust." Her eyes filled again, but she didn't interrupt. He continued. "I got caught up in things I didn't understand. I let someone control me. I let him use me. And instead of protecting you, I dragged you into the fallout of his mess and my choices." He took a shaky breath. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. You don't owe me that. I just needed you to know that you didn't deserve any of it. And the person I became isn't who I want to be anymore." Lena wiped her face. "You broke me, Evan." "I know," he whispered, "and I'm sorry. I'll be sorry for a long time." Then came the part I didn't expect. Lena reached into the blanket, pulled out the engagement ring he'd given her. She didn't hand it back. She didn't throw it. She simply held it. "I don't know what happens next," she said softly. "I don't know if I can trust you again. But I do know this: what Derek did to you wasn't your fault. What you did to me was—" Evan nodded, eyes filled with tears. "And both things are true," she added. Evan broke. Not dramatically, not loudly. Just a silent sob that cracked something deep inside him. Lena reached out hesitantly, then placed her hand on his. Not reconciliation, not romance, just compassion. "I need time," she whispered. Evan nodded. "I'll give you all the time you need." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. But it was the first step on solid ground. The public apology he didn't expect to give. As we walked back to the car, Evan stopped suddenly. "Grandma, I need to fix more than Lena. People online think I'm a monster." I touched his arm. "Then you need to tell your story. Not as an excuse, but as truth." He nodded with surprising determination. "I want to make a statement. A real one. Honest. No script, no performance, no Derek." And he did. That very evening, he posted a video. No music, no edits. Just him, sitting in front of a plain wall, saying, "I hurt people I love. I lied. I let someone control my decisions, and I let my desire to be somebody blind me to who I was becoming. I'm taking responsibility. I'm cooperating with investigators, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life rebuilding the trust I broke." The comments, shockingly, weren't hateful. Most of them said things like, "Accountability matters. Good job. Proud of you for owning up. Get therapy. Heal. Grow." He read them quietly, biting his lip. "Maybe I can become someone better," he whispered. "You already began," I said. Where healing first took root. That night, after everything, Evan sat on the porch while the sun disappeared behind the rooftops. He looked exhausted, but lighter. "Grandma," he said after a long pause, "I don't deserve your love." I sat beside him. "You're not supposed to earn it. You're supposed to honor it." He nodded slowly, tears welling again. "I want to try." And for the first time since the chaos began, I actually believed him. Healing had begun. Not perfectly, not quickly, but genuinely. And tomorrow would require even more courage, because the legal process was far from over. But for now, we finally had hope. The courthouse felt colder than it should have. Not physically, just emotionally. Like the walls themselves absorbed the weight of every broken promise, every lie told under oath, every truth someone was finally brave enough to speak. When Evan and I walked through the metal detectors together, he looked pale but composed, clutching a folder Carla had prepared. Documentation, timelines, copies of the predatory contracts Derek had pushed in front of him. Today wasn't a trial. It was a preliminary hearing, just enough for the judge to decide whether Derek's charges would move forward formally. But for Evan, it was the first time he'd speak publicly, as a victim, not a criminal. We sat in the hallway outside the courtroom. Evan's knee bounced uncontrollably. "Grandma," he whispered, "what if I panic? What if I mess this up? What if—" I covered his hand with mine. "Then you start again. Truth doesn't break if it's shaken. It only breaks if it's buried." He nodded, breathing deep. I could see the boy he used to be, the one who second-guessed himself, who wanted desperately to be good, fighting through the shame. Then the courtroom doors opened. "Case 4812, State v. Hale," the bailiff announced. We walked in, and there he was. The man who built his life on lies, Derek sat at the defense table wearing a stiff suit that didn't fit him either physically or spiritually. His hair was slicked back, his jaw was set tight with indignation. He looked less like a mastermind now, and more like a man caught holding a match in a room full of gas fumes. He didn't look at Evan at first. He looked at me. A glare. Cold. Accusing. Like I'd personally dismantled the empire he'd built on other people's instability. Maybe I had. The judge entered. Everyone rose. Everyone sat. And then the prosecutor began. Your Honor, we intend to show a pattern of coercive fraud, identity misuse, and financial exploitation spanning multiple individuals, including Mr. Evan Rowley, who is present today. When Evan's name was spoken aloud, Derek finally turned. His lips curled into a familiar, poisonous smirk, like he believed, even now, that he still owned the strings. The questions that revealed everything. Evan was called to the stand first. His hands trembled as he took the oath, but his voice didn't break, at least not yet. The prosecutor stepped forward. Mr. Rowley, can you tell the court in your own words how you met the defendant? Evan swallowed. I met Derek at a branding workshop. He said he saw potential in me. He said I could build a career if I trusted him. And did you trust him? Yes, Evan whispered. Completely. What happened next? He started giving me advice. About my relationship, my family, my finances. He told me I shouldn't share things with my grandmother because older people don't understand opportunity. He told me Lena didn't think big enough. He said if I wanted success, I had to listen to him. The courtroom murmured. The judge quieted them. And did he ever ask you to sign anything? Evan nodded. Yes, several documents. He said they were brand partnership contracts. I didn't read them. I just signed. I didn't want to look stupid. Did you later learn what these documents actually were? Evan's throat tightened. Yes. They were loan applications. Some were credit lines in my name. 2 were high-interest contracts tied to fake influencers Derek controlled. Derek's attorney jumped up. Objection. Hearsay. The prosecutor didn't flinch. Your Honor, we have the original applications, security footage from financial offices, and witnesses prepared to testify to the defendant's pattern. The judge nodded. Objection. Overruled. Evan continued. He said I wouldn't owe anything. He said he'd flip the loans before they came due. But then bills came. Letters. Notifications. And he told me to ignore them. To delete them. To trust him. And did he pressure you to keep this from your grandmother? Yes. How? He told me she'd give up on me if she knew. That she'd think I was irresponsible. He said she'd stop believing in me. And I didn't want that. My heart broke at that. For the boy he'd been. For the young man he was trying to become. For the innocence Derek had ground down into something sharp and obedient. The prosecutor leaned closer. Evan. Did Derek ever threaten you? Evan hesitated, then nodded. Yes. When things started falling apart, he said if I told anyone, he'd say I was part of it. That I'd go to jail. That no one would believe me. He told me my grandmother cared more about money than me, and that the Hartmans would think I was dirt once they knew the truth. He said I needed him. That last line, said so small, so devastated, made something inside the judge shift visibly. Evan wasn't just testifying. He was freeing himself. Derek's turn, and the mask finally fell. When Derek rose to speak, his confidence cracked immediately. Your Honor, this entire story is exaggerated. Evan signed everything willingly. He came to me for guidance. He wanted financial freedom. He wanted fame. The judge raised an eyebrow. You coached him to hide debt notices. That's not, Derek stuttered. You advised him to isolate himself from his support system. Derek's voice pitched higher. That's a mischaracterization. And you attempted to intimidate Mrs. Rowley after she confronted you. His face darkened. She recorded me illegally. Actually, the judge said dryly, this state allows one-party consent. That was the moment Derek snapped. He slammed his hand against the table. This is ridiculous. I built his future. I shaped his brand. You exploited him. The judge corrected calmly. Under investigation standards, your behavior meets criteria for coercive financial fraud. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. It was over. Everyone in the room knew it. Everyone but Derek. The moment Evan stood tall. As we walked out of the courtroom, Evan leaned against the hallway wall, breathing like he'd just run miles uphill. I didn't think I could do that, he whispered. You didn't do it alone, I said, brushing a hand through his hair. But the courage, the voice, the honesty, that was all yours. He shook his head, tears gathering. Grandma, I'm still so ashamed. Good, I said gently. Shame shows you understand the harm, but growth comes from what you do after. He nodded slowly. I want to rebuild. I want to earn back the trust I broke. From you, from Lena, from myself. You will, I said, one right step at a time. He let out a shaky laugh. I took my first real step today. Yes, I said. And tomorrow, you'll take another. The judge didn't announce a final ruling that day. Preliminary hearings don't work like that. Justice moves slower, heavier, like a train building momentum before it barrels forward. But still, we walked out of that courthouse with something we didn't have before. Direction. A shift. A sense that the truth had finally stood tall enough for everyone in the room to see it clearly. And sometimes that's the moment a life starts over, not when the sentence is handed down, but when the lies lose their power. For Evan, that moment had just arrived. He exhaled in a way I hadn't heard from him in years, like he'd been holding his breath since the first day. Derek said, "Trust me." And he finally learned what that sentence truly cost him. A home that felt new again. Back at my house, he sank into the living room chair with a heaviness that wasn't exhaustion, more like release. He rubbed his eyes. I didn't think telling the truth would hurt this much, he whispered. Telling the truth doesn't hurt, I said. Holding it in does. He nodded slowly, absorbing it. It always takes time for shame to unwind from the ribs it's wrapped itself around. After a moment, he looked up with something close to fear. Grandma, what happens now? What happens to Lena and me? I hesitated because the right answer required honesty, not comfort. You two will need to rebuild, not based on apologies, but on actions, on accountability, on time. Do you think she'll give me another chance? He asked quietly. She already started giving you one, I said. She came today. His eyes widened. He hadn't seen her, but she'd slipped into the back row of the courtroom, hands knotted in her sweater, eyes fixed on him as he testified. She didn't speak. She didn't wave. She just listened to the man trying to earn his way back to the life he almost lost. The visit. Later that evening, Lena arrived at my front door, hesitant but resolute. Evan froze when he saw her. Not because he expected forgiveness, he didn't, but because he knew he didn't deserve it yet. Lena stepped inside, chin trembling slightly. I saw everything, she said softly. All of it. And, Evan, I'm not ready to come back, but I'm ready to listen. A tiny, fragile seed, one that needed patience to grow. Evan's voice cracked. I understand. I won't ask for anything. I'll just show you. Day by day. She nodded. That's all I expect. Then she turned to leave, but glanced at me before stepping out. Thank you, she whispered, for fighting for him when he couldn't fight for himself. I didn't correct her, because the truth was, Evan had fought. He just needed someone beside him to hold the light steady while he crawled out of the dark. The call from the state. 2 days later, Carla called with an update. The judge is advancing the charges, she said. Coercive fraud, identity misuse, intimidation, and financial exploitation. Derek's bond was increased. He won't be walking out anytime soon. I closed my eyes. Relief washed over me, not triumph, just quiet gratitude. And Evan? I asked. He's listed as a cooperative victim, she said. No liability, no charges, no involvement. The breath I let out felt like releasing a weight I'd been carrying under my ribs for months. Justice wasn't finished, but it had begun. A dinner that meant more than food. That night, Evan and I cooked dinner together, something simple. Soup, bread. The comfort food you make when a soul needs cushioning. He stirred the pot quietly before saying, Grandma, can I ask you something? Personal? I nodded. Were you ever going to give up on me? When things were bad? I looked at him carefully. No, but I wasn't going to excuse you either. He swallowed hard. That's what scared me. That you'd stop loving me if you saw how badly I'd messed up. Sweetheart, I said softly. Love doesn't vanish because someone stumbles. But trust? Trust is built by how we rise afterward. His eyes stung with tears he didn't hide this time. The sentencing. 3 months later, the courtroom was full again, this time with finality in the air. Derek walked in wearing a prison-issued jumpsuit instead of arrogance. His eyes were wild, confused, almost betrayed by the universe that no longer bent to his manipulation. The judge read the charges one by one, each a nail sealing the coffin of Derek's influence. Coercive financial fraud, identity misuse, intimidation, document tampering, exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Finally, the judge looked directly at Derek. You targeted individuals who trusted you. You isolated them from their support systems. You manipulated them into debt and shame. This court rejects your claim of mentorship. It recognizes your behavior for what it was: predatory. Silence. Then, for these crimes, the court sentences you to 8 years incarceration, with mandatory financial restitution and a prohibition against managing or advising any individual in financial or professional matters. Evan squeezed my hand, not out of vengeance, but out of release. His voice was steady when he whispered, "It's over." The new beginning. 6 months after sentencing, Evan stood on a small stage at a local community center, delivering a talk for young adults at risk of financial exploitation. He spoke clearly, honestly, not as a victim, but as someone who survived manipulation and built himself back from the inside out. "I'm not telling you this because I'm proud," he said. "I'm telling you because shame grows in silence, and I lost myself listening to someone who pretended to build me up while tearing me apart. But I found myself again because someone who loved me saw the truth before I did and didn't give up." He looked at me, directly, intentionally. And that's what real family is. My eyes burned, not with sadness, but with something closer to grace. If you're listening to this story, if you've ever been manipulated, isolated, or made to feel small by someone who claimed it was for your own good, I want you to hear me. You are not the mistake you made. You are the person choosing what to do next. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth out loud and let the light reach the parts you've been hiding. Tell me below, which moment in this story hit you the hardest? And have you ever had to pull a loved one out of someone else's shadow? If you want more stories of truth, resilience, and quiet strength, make sure to subscribe to Silent Her. Your story might be the next one someone needs to hear.